Andrea Waltz is one of the most dynamic individuals I think you could ever possibly hope to meet. I have been a fan of hers on social media for a while. She is someone that has energy, enthusiasm, and she has this go for no approach to life, and it informs her work and her speaking. And I can't wait for us to dig into this because I think this is going to be one of the most fun conversations I have this year. She is just a spitfire of real positivity and enthusiasm, but also gumption, drive, commitment, showing up to do the work. And I just think you guys are going to be so absolutely inspired and motivated by this woman because I know I have been. I'm so grateful that Andrea agreed to be a part of today's podcast. So, with no further ado, let's dive in. Andrea
Okay.
Waltz, thank you and welcome to the Ripple Effect podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, Steve, I'm doing great.
I got to say, I have been brimming with excitement all day because I've been looking forward to our conversation because I have been a big fan of yours on social media. I have not had the pleasure of reading your book yet, but it is on my list. It's coming. But Go for No. I want to start there because I think it is such. I've watched some of your videos and some of the things that you do to talk about this as a topic, but I'd love for you to share just the principle and the concept, maybe the inspiration behind the book.
Yeah, so the inspiration comes from a story that we often tell when we speak, and it's a story that's in the book, and it's a story that happened to my husband and business partner Richard, where he learned kind of the go for no, I guess the core go for no philosophy. And he was selling suits for a living. He was failing. He was doing horrible. District manager was visiting the store. Richard thought it would give him time to improve his sales if he could impress this guy. So he proceeds to have this fantastic sale. And this goes back a long time, Steve. So I'll fast forward to today's dollars and just say, let's pretend it was like a $5,000 sale. It was really like 1,100, but it would be like spending 5,000 today.
Inflation, yeah.
Inflation, yeah.
Yeah.
So he has this great sale. He's thinking he's going to get congratulated, but instead the district manager asks him, what did that customer say no to? To which Richard has to review the sale and thinks
Yeah.
the customer didn't say no to anything. Everything I put in front of that guy, he bought. And then the district manager asked him the really important question, which was, how did you know he was done? And it was
Oh,
right. It was really the way he knew he was done was that customer had hit his mental spending limit. That everything he laid in front of the guy said yes to. He never heard no, but he ended the sale. So this was the little seed. This was the little like starting point of, wait a minute, maybe no isn't so bad, because this district manager said you need to go for no. No is the thing that's holding you back. And when Richard shared this story with me over 2 decades ago, I actually thought I was a superstar salesperson. I thought I was great. Customers loved me.
yeah.
And then I had to get honest and I thought, you know what? I don't maximize my interactions. I hold back. I make judgments on what I might share or what I might
Wow.
say, right? In order to protect myself and to not hear no. So we decided, you know what, this
Were you
concept.
conscious of that at the time, or was that something
Mhm.
you just started thinking about after you kind of had this new perspective?
Well, once, and this is kind of the funny thing, when we tell that story, we always tell it as like the foundation, and we tell it a lot. It's a lot longer. We finesse it and add the
Yeah.
details in. But when we tell this story, it really is an immediate reframe. People go like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I get it." And so I had an immediate reframe, and I started looking at what I was doing through a new lens. I started saying, like, at first, when I heard it, I said, "Nah, I don't let no bother me." I wasn't one of these hardcore people who say like, I
Sure.
eat no for breakfast and
Yeah.
I don't, it doesn't bother me. But I certainly didn't think like I had issues. And then I got honest and then I realized, yeah, I don't like it. I do shy away, and certainly I didn't want to look pushy and I didn't want to look aggressive. Funny part though is that go for yes, like I'm going to do whatever I have to do, Steve, to
Yeah.
make you say yes and to buy this thing. Like I'm going to twist your arm. That's the one that gets people in trouble. Go for no
Yeah.
is just no is perfectly fine. It's a perfectly acceptable answer. But the important part is that we ask, that we have the courage to ask. And
Yeah.
so I have spent like the last 2 decades studying rejection, failure, asking, the skills to ask, how to get better at asking, how to deal with the psychology behind it. And I'm like obsessed with it. It's definitely my passion.
I love that. I'm curious when you were selling and you were kind of insulating yourself from the no's, what were you selling at the time?
So I had worked my way up to general manager at Lens Crafters. And so
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was running one of the highest volume locations in the company. I had become a licensed optician, which is I had no plans to do that. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I wanted to catch bad guys,
Yeah.
but I guess that wasn't in the cards for me. I
Instead,
had
you
to do
caught
it.
eyes.
Yeah, well, exactly, exactly. Well, the only thing that was available was an unpaid internship, and I really was desperate to make money at that point in my after being in college and starving. I was tired of starving. So um yeah, but I as a general manager, even though I wasn't like a quote salesperson, I would still sell, periodically, and so I just applied it to that my career fundamentally, and I would train. We actually Richard was like one of the great best trainers in the whole company, so he was training people on go for no. That's how he taught me this idea. So we eventually just quit our jobs, our corporate jobs, launched our company. We had all the same sales and management philosophies and customer service philosophies, and we just wanted to go out. They don't listen to you when you work for a company. You're just like, okay, how good could you be? You work for us. No, we want to go
Yeah.
hire a consultant, right? Somebody who knows what they're really talking about. So we became those people. Like we
Yeah.
decided we'll be people from the outside and bring our ideas in to companies, and that's what we did. So I had to apply go for no to like the B2B sales world of
Sure.
cold calling prospects and picking up the phone and going like, do you hire speakers? Okay,
Yeah.
great, here's information. You know how that process goes.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
so much fun.
Oh, I don't know that I'd call it fun.
I'm kidding.
I was like, well, you being as confident as you are, I'm sure it's like, yeah, everybody says yes to you, but they wouldn't say yes to me all the time. So,
Oh my gosh, I got so many no's, plenty of no's, yeah. And I was terrified to do it. I was terrified, and I tell people all the time to this day, like, we couldn't have written Go for No, we couldn't teach it if we were one of these people who just had the all the confidence in the world. We're not people who get up and say, "It's easy. Yes, you just need to be confident." No, I mean, we needed Go for No because we didn't like it ourselves.
yeah, yeah, you got to live it and before you can teach it and sell it. Right. So
Right.
for
Yeah.
sure. I resonate with Richard's story because one of my first jobs while I was in college was working for a copier dealership. And I remember my boss always walking in with two pieces of advice, one at the beginning of the day and one at the end, which was, the beginning of the day was it's a new day, it's a new chance to excel. And I kind of lived by that philosophy for a long time because no matter what happened yesterday, that's done. It's in the past. And now you have an opportunity to remake today. So if you had yesterday was a horrible day calling on people, make today a better day calling on people. And then he'd walk in at the end of the day and he would want to know the no quota, right? How many no's did you get? How many
Mm,
doors did you have slammed in your face? And inevitably, whatever the number was, I could have just blown it out that day and it would still be never enough. And what he
mm,
said to me about the no is that you get no, and no toughens you up, no strengthens your reserve, it tests your metal, it makes sure that what you're doing you're committed to doing. And eventually, once you've heard enough of those, you've toughened up enough, then the yeses start to fall. And it was absolutely true. I mean, it was, there's a lot of philosophies. You and I have both probably been in these capacities where we've trained sales teams and you work, with them to help them understand what's the best way to set themselves up for success. And there's always that tried and true. It's a numbers game. You just got to keep at it. You got to do it. but there's also a lot about understanding rejection and why you are not getting the response that you're looking for, and that it's okay to actually hear that, because everyone gets you closer to a yes, which is also an overused, phrase that coaches use all the time. But at the end of the day, it's very valid and true. And there's a lot of lessons in no. There's a lot of self examination and introspection that can actually occur if you really embrace it, as opposed to try to avoid it or look at it with a sense of shame.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too because I remember we interviewed Larry Winget. Do you know who Larry Winget is? Do
That
you
name
know
is
that
really
name?
familiar.
Yeah, so he his tagline was, he was really big, very, very popular speaker, um,
Yes.
and then in like the 90s and,
Yeah.
spoke everywhere. He
He was
called
always on
himself
the
the
Zig Ziglar thing, right? I think
Yeah,
that's
I
where I
think
saw.
I
Yep.
probably, and he
Yep.
called himself the pit bull of personal development. We
Yes.
interviewed him for, a Go for No movie we did, and he said, "Every no gets you closer to yes." He goes, "It's one of the classic cliches. It's like one of the oldest cliches in the book." He goes, "But cliches are cliches for a reason.
For a reason.
Most of them
Yeah.
are true, right? And
That's
and
right.
they work." So, yeah, you're so right.
Ah, well, so as you guys moved from being in the corporate bubble and then deciding to start your own thing, talk to us a little bit about that journey. What was the thing that most surprised you about doing it, and what's the thing that has kept you going all these years doing it?
Oh, wow, good questions. What is this thing that it's kinda like I the analogy I give to be going from the corporate world to being on your own is like, you have to get really comfortable with uncertainty, and you just have to fall in love with it. And
Yeah,
I equate it
because you're
to
now
I don't
married to it, whether you like it or not, right?
that's right, and I don't love turbulence on an airplane, but once I get in and once I get settled and I realize like, okay, the flight's kind of bumpy and it's probably gonna be bumpy the whole way, so I'm just gonna roll with that.
Yeah,
That's what the entrepreneurship is like. You go like, "Oh, it's bumpy and it's going to be bumpy basically forever." So just
yeah,
settle in and get used to it. That was surprising. The other thing I think that surprised me was that I just didn't consider it. It's a very obvious thing is you are constantly learning. If you don't stay on top of what's going on in the industries that you serve, in your own industry, just even in the world of like for us, professional speaking, training, writing books, publishing, marketing, you are getting a master's degree like every 4 years of just learning what's the new technology, what's the new thing, where are your customers hanging out, you need to get in front of them. Then the good thing is that as we do it for our own business, we kind of understand what our clients and the people that are out there in the field are going through because they're going through the same thing, right? So everybody right now, everybody's learning, okay, what's the new thing? It's AI. We all know it's coming. So everybody's looking at how do I apply AI to what I do and to make myself more effective and better. So that's
yeah,
I think the thing that just it's a never-ending journey. You're never done learning because everything is always changing. And I mean it makes it fun, but sometimes you just go like, can I just relax for like 6 months and do nothing and just coast just for a little bit?
yeah. And the answer is always no, right?
That's right. The answer to that is a absolute hard no. Yeah,
That is a hard no. And not necessarily the no you want to get to, but it's the reality of being an entrepreneur for sure.
that's right.
So, how many years have you guys been in business for yourselves?
So we started in about 1998
Okay.
is when we launched our company. We
So
had
you were
two
probably like about 12 at that point, or what?
I was pretty young. I was pretty
Yeah.
young. I like to say so today I joke I'm a dinosaur in this industry and I mean that literally, almost literally. But we had two big speed bumps. One was 9/11. Like everybody had, we were pretty new in business and so our business really fell off in 2001. Just everybody stopped doing training and hiring people. And so I took a job as the training director for a pet supply retailer in Los Angeles. At the time, that's where we lived. And I was, it was perfect because our customers at that time, our clients were all retailers. We spoke for J.C. Penney and Macy's, and anybody that you'd see in the mall was our customer. So I felt I
Ah,
fit right in there. I was there for about 2 years and then transitioned back. Richard was still maintaining our business, but the business was so off that he was
yeah.
able to do it on his own. And then I came back, and then uh like um gosh, what was it? 2008, did little things on the side, and even in 2017, it wasn't that our business was off necessarily, but we've had our bright shiny object moments where we've taken our eye off the ball. And one of
Sure.
the things that we've gotten into is publishing. So we've ended up publishing a lot of other people's books because we're good at it. So it's just really interesting how business goes, and sometimes you find things, and we kind of joke that we're the most reluctant publishers on the planet. When people ask us like, can you publish our book, we're always like, no. Don't make us do it. Don't make us do it. But we sometimes you have knowledge that you want to monetize. You're like, gosh, I'm good
Sure.
at this. And one of the mantras, and I know Steve, you can appreciate this, is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. Another
Amen. Yes. Yes.
really important lesson there.
Very,
But
a painful lesson for many of us entrepreneurs to learn, right? So,
yes,
yeah.
yes, because you soon realize that if you are chasing two rabbits, you will catch neither of them.
Yeah. 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 Oh, absolutely. It's tough. And, of course, I say that and, I am living that analogy now because I have Ripple and what I do through it. And then I have a software company on sort of my other persona, right? My other
Mhm.
area of focus. And so part of what I had to come to a realization was, yes, they're separate entities, but actually part of what I do has the ability to be combined, which made it a little more congruent for me. So I feel like at any given day, I'm actually investing in the efforts and the progress of both. And when one works, the other one kind of is the tag along, and then vice versa. So that's
Yes.
allowed me to theoretically wrangle both rabbits. I may not be able to completely catch them, but I'm holding on with dear life with the rope is while they run. But
Right, right. Well, it's kinda like, if I chase this rabbit, the other one will have no choice but to come along. We'll just drag
that's
that
right.
one
Yeah,
behind
that's
us.
right. Yeah, you're stuck. You're
Yeah.
stuck. Absolutely. Um, I'm really curious about the approach that you take, now with regards to, like how you've built your business. Is the vast majority of the organizations that you work with, are you working with their sales and business development team? What's the most ideal prospect or client for you guys now as you move towards 2025?
Yeah, so we typically go in and go out.
Okay.
We don't go in and go deep, and we're not consultants. We did more of that in the retail industry because we
Okay.
really specialized in that industry for several years.
Yeah.
We knew it because we had been in it, and Richard had been in it for years, even before we met. So he had so much expertise. So we would go in and not necessarily consult, but we would do a lot more customization and a lot more things. After we decided that we weren't going to continue specializing in that industry, we really went with go for no as our main message. Our goal is to teach individuals, teams, and organizations how to intentionally increase the number of no's that they're going to hear in order to get to yes, and all of the nuances and mindsets that go into that, and how to handle no. And I mean, we could do a training for like 2 days on this material. And as a result, we ended up not specializing with anyone, insurance and financial planners and recruiting organizations. And so we've become more speaker focused,
Yeah.
where we then do a talk for 60 or 90 minutes, maybe follow up with other things, but all kind of superficial, not really going deep. So that's kind of where we are today. Although I've also COVID, of course, changed business
Sure.
dramatically. And one of the things that we did during that time when we were just sitting around going like, what should we do? Was we created a couple of workbooks. We created a leadership workbook and a Go for No 21-day challenge workbook. So one of the fun things I do is something called a Go for No 21-day challenge, where we market to individuals, and it's so, and it, like, this is just like this is not a moneymaker, like in terms of my time. I probably break it down. I probably get paid about $12.50 for doing this. It's fine. An hour, it's fine. I love it. And but we have individuals sign up and we take them through this 21-day challenge where we meet every week and do accountability, and that's really fun. So there's things that we have just kind of added in as we've
Yeah.
gone, and it's really interesting just to see how people sell today and how they interact and how Go for No fits in today's market compared to 20 years ago. And it has evolved, and technology has changed it, right? There's so much less in in person. People aren't
Yeah.
necessarily going door to door or dropping in B2B, like where they're literally visiting a customer. Although I'm going out with a salesperson next week and we are literally going out to visit
Oh,
customers. So
wow.
yeah, I
That's
know.
good.
So I'm excited about that. So some of that still exists, but so much of it is direct message and
Yeah.
email and all of these things. But I find that the issues that people have with rejection still apply. You still have to have your numbers. And to your point about sales as a numbers game, it really is. It is. And yet, with that today, quality is more important than ever.
Yeah.
You talk about building connections and relationships. That's more important than ever. So
Yeah.
I find that I am trying to weave Go for No in with that know, like, and trust message of, hey, you need to build relationships, but how does that relationship starts? Well, it starts with the courage of you oftentimes reaching out to somebody cold and saying, hey, we don't really know each other, I'd like to connect with you. Maybe it's LinkedIn. Moving that to the next step of, can we meet on Zoom, can we have coffee, whatever. Somebody's got to build that relationship, and that means somebody has to go first. It's just like on the playground. If you want to go play with somebody on the swing set, somebody's got to invite you over. Like, somebody's got to make the first move. And so that's still, I think, very relevant to today.
I love that. I love there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because you and I both, I think, understand how vastly different the market space is in terms of outside sales than it was even maybe 10 years ago, right? Because, cold calling and the tried and true ways that have been sort of historically always there for a sales individual, sales representative, or business development person is vastly different because of the different ways that people approach it. Now, you very rarely actually walk into an office building and see multiple salespeople working door to door to door, because they just don't do that anymore. But the tools and the technology also make it really more challenging for anybody in a business development effort, because it's so much easier to get ignored. I remember my days. I told my son this, my oldest son, the other day. I said, "You haven't really lived until you've been thrown out of an office building because you were cold calling, right?" And you meet you meet people along the way, and they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to have anything to do with you, and yet you still have to stand before them, and you somehow have to get your business card in their hand and try to get the name of the person that might be over whatever product or service you're selling, and nothing tests your metal more than that. And I told him, I'm shy and introverted. The best thing I ever did was take an outside sales job because it required that I got beat up a lot. And as an introverted, shy individual, walking in and just being berated by, a gatekeeper,
Right.
I mean, you really are starting to think about life choices at that point, right? And
Yeah.
can I stick here? Can I actually make it through? But when you take that amount of rejection or that challenge, and you're able to take it on the chin and still continue to get up and do the next call and approach it. I learned a lot about myself as an individual doing that. I did it for years and years. But the thing that I think is really interesting in today's world, and I'm curious how you guys approach this in terms of how you train or work with the clients that you serve, is that ghosting's a real thing now, right? I mean, it's like, they either A, don't have to pick up their phone. In fact, nobody picks up their phone anymore. Nobody returns a voicemail. email, there's so many emails and so much junk that comes in that catching anybody's eye or attention on an email is becoming increasingly harder. And then, of course, you have LinkedIn, which is established as a platform for us as business individuals to get to know one another, understand our professional sort of resumes. It's a phenomenal tool that has become like now Facebook for business. And so there's all
Mm,
this noise. So when you're working with, or you're in front of an audience or you're working with an organization and they're like, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out there and even get the opportunity to get thrown out or be told no. What's your advice these days? Because the environment is so vastly different than it was even 10, 15 years ago.
right. Well, I think it's funny because it's very simple, but it's of course not easy. I mean, one is you've got to know and find your buyer,
Yeah.
and you need to and once you figure that out, you've got to make sure that you're speaking to the right buyer as well. And so our like general, I guess you'd say, overall methodology philosophy. Go for No is not really a sales training program. We have no
Right.
process. We have no like, here are the steps. But one of the philosophies is disqualify.
Yeah.
Find the people that are not for you. And you can do that a couple ways. One, you can do it just top line, which means go if you're prospecting on LinkedIn or you're trying to connect with people, don't go to a networking event you that you haven't vetted, and know that your prospects are not hanging out there. Or don't
Right.
go on LinkedIn and just start spamming people randomly. Figure out who, like, where are they, what's the if it's a company, what's the revenue that you want, what do they do, all of those things. Niche down as much as possible. My favorite example of this is the Viking cruises. I don't know if you've gotten
Yeah.
that brochure, right? The Viking cruise, and they have a sales page in there, which I absolutely love. And it's the sales page of No, and they list all of the things you do not get on a Viking cruise. And it's
Oh,
like,
yes. I've
we
seen
don't,
this. Yeah.
right, right. We don't do the photography. We don't have the big fancy dinners.
No big pool. None of
No
that.
big
Yeah.
pool. You're not going to walk around with some crazy drink. No to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
No casinos. So it's like, this is a refined adult experience. And if you want the other crazy, wacky experience, there's plenty of that out
Sure.
there. And so I think, as for all of us, and this is, I think it's the one thing that I've been happy that we've done, is we've stayed very tight on what our focus is, even though we're broad from a customer standpoint. It's like, hey, we can help anybody who has to face rejection. So that's everyone. But
Yeah.
the topic, right? The topic is really like, we don't go off into different directions. So one is know your buyer, be willing to disqualify, be willing to ask the tough questions early, and not try to fit that square peg into that round hole of, oh, but they might work. And I don't know, Steve, look, he seems good. And he seems like, his software company needs us. It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, uh, just move on to somebody who is better qualified. And then the second piece is messaging, right? It's working that message. And one of the biggest things from a Go for No standpoint that I see, especially helping people in my challenge, is going out with that message, and whatever platform you're doing it. A lot of people who take the challenge are doing cold calling, and they may follow up with emails or whatever, but they are doing calling. And it's like, you've got to get that message down so it's valuable, but you've got to make enough calls to have the data to make the decision whether that messaging is working or not. And so often people are like, well, this isn't working. How many calls did you make? You made 9. That is not, that is not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You need to
Yeah.
make 90, or better yet, 900. And then we
Yeah.
can look and say,
Yeah.
okay, you're right. Your messaging isn't catching on. Or maybe the message is catching on, but and people are interested, but then you're not setting an appointment, or you're setting appointments and you're not closing. Throughout the funnel, it's constantly looking at, where does that fall apart. But beyond that, the biggest thing that we focus on when we speak, or when we teach people, is just that mindset of that persistence, and being willing to hear those no's in order to get the yes. It's not just about, and really wanting to, it's not just about kind of suffering through. but it's wanting to, so that, and you said it so beautifully, you've got to want it so you do beat up, you get
Yeah.
beat up, you do learn from them, you do grow from them, and you figure out, okay, so every time I approach the gatekeeper with this message, I get thrown out metaphorically. Let me try this. Let me do this a different way. And that is the mindset that is so important to keep people in the game.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny. I know you say it's obviously your market is broader than you might first think because, if you have rejection anywhere in your life or in your work, um, they can benefit from what you train on. It's not just sales or business development. I could see that, and there's so many different areas, right? I want our audience to really, sit up and pay attention to this because, I mean, how many times you get told no during the day, right? It could be from a spouse, your kid, it could be your neighbor, it could be a community organization within your own company, trying to get a project initiative off the ground or try to get additional funding for something. There's so many different ways, and I always like to tell people, like, when I speak to an audience, depending on, what the topic is, but if it's geared around leadership or anything to do with sort of the personal responsibility of what you do in your professional life, I remind everybody's in sales. We're all selling something, right? And we're always in a position to do something, whether we're selling an idea, trying to get funding for a startup, we're trying to write another book, we're trying to ask somebody out on a date, we're trying to get an appointment. These are all avenues where the opportunity for someone to give you rejection or say no, there's a high probability of it. And the more that you can get comfortable with that, the more that you can learn from, like you said, understand what works, what doesn't work. It is really a science game. I don't know how many people I've told. I think that you and I kind of look at our industry kind of the same way, is that there's opportunity to benefit from the data and the knowledge that you pick up, and if you're paying attention and you're being really meticulous in terms of what you're tracking and how you're tracking, it can open up a plethora of new ideas and creativity for doing things differently. And I've told many leaders, one of the movies that I like to watch is Moneyball, and I don't know if you saw Moneyball with
Mhm.
Brad Pitt, and but it what they were doing was leveraging the numbers, to figure out how to get more successful on bat opportunities, which produces hopefully runs, right? And at the end of the day, how to do that on a shoestring budget. And what they were doing was dealing with a problem where the Yankees were $140 million payroll, right, for their runs to the World Series, and these guys were more like $20 million, right?
Mhm.
The definitely an apples and orange comparison, but it was kind of proof positive that when you start to look beyond what has always been or what we've always thought was just the way, and do things differently, then you often find new paths to different outcomes. And that's what I love about your all's work, is that you are helping people say, hey, don't shy away from the no, and don't be ashamed of the no. It's part of life. We all hear it. And it's what we really learn from it along the way that actually makes us better, that eventually will get us to a lot more yeses, right?
Yeah, that's so perfectly said. And I love Moneyball. We've watched that more than once.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Sadly, every time it's on TV, it's like Rudy. I just stop and I just watch.
Right, and then you just get sucked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I think what I've watched in it, I got to see, you guys have both a really powerful energy when you present and you speak. And I really love that. And I encourage people to go out and, see some of the videos that are out there of, with you guys presenting. I can see why this message resonates, and kind of why you were kind of more or less geared towards more of that speaker audience, because at the end of the day, what you're talking about is so powerful, and it can impact any organization no matter what size they are. What's the most surprising thing about sort of this new iteration of your business going into 2025 that you didn't expect, maybe even pre-COVID?
Yeah, you that's right, you did ask me about what's the most surprising thing,
No
and it
worries, I'll
just
come back to it. Yeah, it's all good.
yeah,
We
yeah,
we
no,
had
it's
some good
good.
stuff going. So
You you by asking that, you just triggered the thought in my head. I think the most surprising thing is I sometimes I was just telling Richard this the other day. I'm like, "You know what? We are too close to this material sometimes, and we have to remain dumb. We have to remain dumber. And this is just like, I even back in my corporate days, I remember telling everybody, you like, the smarter you get, the worse it is, because you stop explaining things to customers. You
Yep.
start getting so good that you think that the basics don't matter. And even as a salesperson, you get so good, you forget the fundamentals.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think sometimes in this, for Go for No, I've been teaching it so long that I forget that sometimes the foundation is where I need to start. And I will jump ahead to things that I feel like are more advanced mindset concepts, or things that are more like philosophical or esoteric or whatever, or even more tactical. And then sometimes I'll post, and most of this is like social media just to gauge reaction. And then sometimes I'll post like a Thomas Edison quote about not giving up, or Thomas Edison, he tried with the light bulb, 1,000 times and or 10,000 times until one finally worked. And people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's so amazing." And I'm thinking, this is the most basic idea of, there's so much, I have so much gold here, and you are looking at this idea. And I think like, but the simplicity of it and the power of it is, that's where we started. And I don't need to get fancy. Like, I
Yeah.
need to focus on the fundamentals of this mindset, that, and stop. Sometimes I think like, I need the new thing. I need to talk about this differently. And it's like, no, people are still resonating with the things that are the, like, they're so fundamental. They're the timeless truths, right? They're the timeless principles. Like, begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey. That is a timeless truth. It doesn't matter how technology changes or what happens. It's so powerful. And you think like, oh, will the Franklin Covey organization transition and change that? No, that
No.
will be
Heck no.
there forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like what you said there about, it sometimes you have to go back to the basics, right? The
Mhm.
blocking and tackling, and meet people where they are. And I think that there is this, I do think, it's kind of funny that you said that, like, you struggle with that a little bit, because I have as well. Cause I'm, especially for Ripple, it's like, yes, relationships are important. How you go about connecting with other people. I mean, yes, super, super, yeah, super logical, and everybody needs it. Yet nobody's really good at it. And so when you kind
Right.
of like peel it back and you say, okay, I actually learned this a couple of years ago. I had a leadership team that pushed back on me and said, the approach that I was proposing to take with their team, they thought was just, yeah, this is, this is old hat. This is stuff that all of our people know. And I was like, really? I said, okay, that's interesting. And the guy said, look, we're here to learn hard skills. We're not here to learn soft skills. Everybody gets soft skills. And I thought about it for a minute, and I sat there, and I knew I was at risk of probably getting tossed out, but it wouldn't have been the first time, right? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Um, you say soft skills, and I said, when you got into your first job, or you actually took this job here, who was the person that took you by the hand and said, "All right, come on, kid, I'm going to show you how to get along with the other kids in the sandbox"? And the one guy who was like the COO, he just looked at me like, "Well, nobody. I had to learn it." I said, "So you learn what you learned, and then you think that is common sense, right?" Yep. I said, "But do you think your common sense differs from your colleague that you're sitting next to?" And he kind of looked at his colleague, and his colleague was like, "Absolutely, looks, way different." And I said, "The thing about hard skills, those are teachables, right? Those are technical, tactical. We can figure those things
Mm,
out. That's the go-to. But you can't do any of the go-to without people, right? And the go-to is important, but also how people get there when they're getting there is really critical." And I said, the part I have the problem with what you said is soft skills imply simple and easy. And it's, again, goes back to common sense. And you are
mm,
assuming everybody's common sense is at the same level yours is. And I can tell you it's not. And it was like one of those defining moments for me where I realized, no, I'm not talking about building a network, or I'm not talking about how to, build that rapport so you get somebody to say yes. It's about human, basic human values, and helping people learn how to engage, because none of us have been really truly taught that. Just like what you guys do as the work you do, it's so important, helping people realize that no is not a negative. It's just a word. It's just a, hey, maybe not right now or maybe never, but that's okay. But the what you learn along the way when you get the no, that's the lesson. That's the mana. That's the good stuff. And when you use that, your next conversation or your next 20 conversations are going to be vastly different, because you're now looking at it with a new set of information and through a new lens. And it's important.
I love that. And to your point about the soft skills, people get nervous, especially people who lead organizations get very nervous about soft skills because they're not easily measured. And
Yeah.
they want to be able to go to anybody who questions them and go like, yeah, we're looking to move this number. And it's like, well, how does
Yeah.
listening skills, how is that going to move the number? And it's like, well, it will, but we're not teaching people, how to fill out this CRM or yet another spreadsheet or yet another report. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and it they it's sad, but there's not enough emphasis on those things. Both the work that you're doing, the work I do, because there's this assumption that everybody gets it, and it's kind of inherent, and that somehow, some way, just because it's my first month as a sales rep selling the new widget, and I should be automatically bulletproof to anybody who might reject me and or the product, service, whatever. And I know how to handle that. And what I've found, and I'm sure you guys have as well, in talking to so many different sales folks over the years, and even leadership team, I mean, it that piece is a contact sport, and it takes a little piece of your soul every time you get the result that you didn't expect. And it takes a lot for you to rebuild that back up and then have the confidence to walk into the ring and fight again.
Yep, it does. And
Yeah.
people ask me all the time, how do I do that exactly? And I'm like, if I could give you like that exact formula, I'd probably not be talking to you because I'd be a billionaire. I would be off on my island. But it is just about just keep showing up over and over again. And I think there's something to that. You just learn how to deal with things the more you experience them. That's all there is
Yeah.
to it. You can't think your way out of it.
No, and I do think that it's such an invaluable skill to learn how to take it and take it gracefully, but not just set it off and as an isolated event, but actually to look at it in postmortem. I have told the
Mm.
sales teams that I've led in the past that you want to look at why people don't do business with you. It isn't necessarily because our product didn't work or the service wasn't that great or whatever. There's usually something else, and the only way that you actually figure out what that reason is to go back to the well and say, hey, I know you went with this other vendor, or I know you said no for right now, and I'm not really going to try and cry over spilled milk, but I'm trying to continually get better. So what else could I have done differently, or what might we have shown you or said, or what could we put on the table that might have given you a different perspective, or may have led you down to want to know more, or ask more questions, or maybe do whatever, see a demo, do a trial, whatever it is that you're doing. And I find that all the time, that for folks that even try to sell to my company, is like, you say, hey, I appreciate it, I'm not interested. And nobody says why. Why are you not interested? Like, why wouldn't you
Right.
be interested? So, how do you ever learn if you don't really understand what the motivation was behind the note anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that you'd bring that up because we addressed that last year. We wrote, well, actually, technically, in 2023. I finally convinced Richard to write a book with me. We wrote a book called uh, I forgot my own title. No, when they say no.
When they
And
say
so
that.
so we keep telling people like, go out there and get no. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What happens when they do say no? And so when they say no was our attempt. And we did 44 things that you should think, do, or say
Oh, brilliant.
when you get a no. And like you said, one of them absolutely is ask why, or ask, be surprised. Wow, I'm surprised because I asked you all these questions, you gave me all these answers. This seems perfect. This seems like the right time. I feel like we've knocked down everything that was an issue. Why not? And
Yeah.
it's yeah, without trying to put the person on the defense, but like I would love to know for my own edification and my own future learning. So I would totally appreciate it. And it is so valuable. There's
Yeah.
a lot of value in no going forward. And sometimes you find out like it's just there's some reason that has nothing to do with you. And for the ones that it had something to do with you and you couldn't control it, you just got to let that go and move on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But, even letting it go, you learn from it and see what you can adapt in the future. And, but that's all you really can do. But I think, one takeaway for our audience is no matter what capacity you're in, try to understand why you're getting it. And I think, one of the things that I think is so valuable is all the resources that you've put out on your website. And we'll cover that at the very end about how people can get involved with your work. But I highly recommend that, they read your books and learn from these nuggets of wisdom, because I can guarantee you there we can always get better. And I think one of the things you said early on is, as entrepreneurs, but also just people, right? In whatever profession you're in, never stop learning, never stop investing in yourself, because it makes you so much more valuable, it makes you more versatile, and it makes you, for your organization, a resource for everybody else. And when you're the resource, then you're the last person they're looking to plug when layoffs are coming, or you're generally one of the more valuable assets from the team perspective. So it's highly recommended. But Andrea, I could talk to you all day because you are infinitely interesting, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I know we had just a short window today, but if you're okay with it, I always like to wrap up my interviews with a few Ripple Connection questions. They're no gotcha questions. They're just fun to
Okay.
ask, fun to
All right,
answer.
cool. Yeah, I'm
And
in.
hey, it's okay to say no if you.
Yes, I'm not going to give you a no. I'm not going to
I
give you a
love that. I love that.
no.
So the we talked about your entrepreneurial journey and sort of that process and that approach. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would we find you doing?
Oh my gosh. Probably fiction writer.
Really?
Yeah, which Richard and I write fiction on the side as our side hobby anyway. So
Oh,
yes,
wow.
it would do that full time. Yeah.
So are you fiction that you're actually producing and putting into books?
Yes, fiction that we produce, put in books, which do not sell. Trust me, and I make this is like any good hobby. We make no money. Okay, there's
Ah.
no money to be made.
Well, one of my connections, and we need to get you into our community, the Ripple Pond. I think you would really enjoy. But one of our folks that's in there, she's actually a professor for OU, but she's actually been writing, and she said the same thing for a very long time. She wrote romance novels, but has finally gotten some traction with both Lifetime and Hallmark, just kind of out of the
That's
blue.
great.
She
Yeah.
might be a really good resource for you, just to, if nothing else, to encourage you to keep doing it, because eventually one of those books is going to land. And then once they land and somebody really gets it and it takes off of popularity, then all the other books that you've had out there all of a sudden become popular too. So
I'm
don't give up.
switching.
And
I'm switching to romance, Steve, because that is where the money is.
that is, it is. I keep telling my wife, I think I could write this Hallmark stuff. I walk through the room when she's watching it. I'm like, I could tell you the whole premise of the damn
Right.
story.
Yeah, you know exactly what's gonna happen.
She claims that it's I don't know anything, but I'm like, look, some dude comes back to the hometown, and there's some flower shop or some bakery that's on it's about to go out of business, and he's got to save or help save it. And the woman that loved him never expressed it, and he left, and the whole
And
nine
he's
yards.
and he's and he's also devastatingly handsome and single. It's
Yeah.
just like it's perfect.
And he's the same guy in every single movie.
Right. Exactly.
it's interesting. All right, so I love that perspective. So you would be a full time fiction writer. What did the 7-year-old version of Andrea want to be when she grew up?
Oh, the 7-year-old me wanted to produce movies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was a total it's funny you have Mandalorian behind you. I was a total
Yeah,
Star Wars geek at age 7. I
I
watched
knew we
that
would be
movie.
friends. That's
Yeah,
just
I
it's a,
know. I watched that movie. Oh, we had a, like, bootleg copy,
yep, yep.
back in the day. Like, we had one of the first VCRs. It was
Like
the size of
the beta
this
tape.
Yeah, size of a
Yep.
suitcase.
Yep.
I
Yep.
watched that movie over and over. I loved it. Yeah, so that's what I would. Yeah. Mhm.
Ah, I am. I mean, just kind of a side note. I'm listening to, and I can send you. I don't remember the author's last name, but I'm listening to, and he's written several biographies, but he wrote one on George Lucas that is just. It's
Oh,
probably one of the best ones I've
oh,
um,
cool.
ever listened to because it's talking about how George didn't fit in, and sort of was kind of a geeky, nerdy kind of, but very into science and a lot of unique, esoteric kind of things, but it really talks about his career path and ultimately end up, at the how he came about making the Star Wars movies. And it's just, as a nerd like that, it's super fascinating. But there's so many lessons as an entrepreneur that I'm taking from the book that just kind of remind you. But to the point, one of the big things, right, was how he was getting his first, his real first film off the ground, and how he kept getting no's and the rejections, and
Mm.
how he had to use that as motivation to toughen up because rejection is just part of the game out in Hollywood. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's interesting. Okay, so since you like Star Wars, favorite character?
Oh, I probably have to go with Han Solo. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep,
Uh, or maybe C3PO. He's so
yeah,
funny. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. Perfect. If you were forced to, what was your favorite Star Wars movie? What's of all of them that have come out?
Oh, I would have to say the New Hope, like the
Okay.
first
Yep.
one. Yeah.
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 That me too. It's just that's where it all started. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, as a successful female entrepreneur, if you were to give advice to other females out there that are thinking about doing something, hanging out their own shingle, starting their own venture, building some other aspect of a business that they could do either as a side hustle or eventually as a full-time entrepreneur, what advice
Mm.
would you give them?
I would say don't drag your feet and wait. Don't let perfection stand in your way. For me, I was so unprepared in every way. I learned as I went on literally everything. I made every mistake you could make. And I thank God, though, that I didn't wait because there was no way to prepare and no way to see the path. And Jack Canfield says this in the movie The Secret. He says all you
Yep,
need to see is the lights 200 feet, your headlights 200 feet in front of you. And that's so true. So
that is true.
I think that the majority, especially for women, we're concerned with doing it right and having it perfect. And I don't want to go out unless I've got all my ducks in a row. And yeah, I think like Richard and I didn't do it a great way. We had very little safety net, and it was crazy. I mean, we moved in, let his house go. We moved into a really sketchy neighborhood in a bad apartment. Like we were like, we got to do what we got to do. So I know a lot of people don't want to get uncomfortable like that. So I get it. You've got to set yourself up for the finances. But beyond that, gosh, don't wait.
I think that's great, and I also think part of that little insight into your background and your history. There's also some value in that, right? When you have that burn the boat strategy, like sometimes failure is not an option because you can't allow it to be an option. You've got to keep moving forward. So you got to figure it out. And I think that especially in today's world where it's so easy to pick, oh, I'm all of a sudden just going to change careers or I'm going to do something different. And you see a lot of people that don't just settle in on something. I think, sticking with it and being as committed as you possibly can, but recognizing that, you may not necessarily have the safety net, but that's okay. Believe in yourself and know what you have that, comes of true value and offer. And if you do it right and, you go through the training, Andrea will provide you, you'll hear a lot of no's, but she'll eventually help you get some yeses. So I think that's the way to go for sure. If, if you were going to give, you're very similar to me. I work with my wife. She considers her work with me. I originally said she would only have to do this for the first year. We've been married now 31 years. She's still doing she's still my CFO on a couple of ventures, but what's the one thing that piece of advice you'd give to a married couple that are looking to go into business together or do something professionally together?
Oh, this is so easy. Give up control. Give up control just on the things that don't matter. You've gotta just that was the biggest thing when Richard and I would butt heads. It would be like, "Well, I think it should have a red stripe on the top of it." "Well, no, I think it should have a yellow stripe." And then it would be like battle. "Here's why the red, here's why the yellow." And then eventually it was like, "You know what? We just have to you're the one who gets to decide how it looks, and then I'll decide on something else." And I remember one day he came to the conclusion because he was changing up some email or something. And he said, I realize that I'm changing this and I'm making it different, but it's not necessarily better.
Yep.
So he said, I'm only going to change things if I really believe that I'm going to make it better. And even right now, we're writing a sequel to Go for No, and we've been battling on one scene. We've been in a total agreement, and eventually I just said, he said, yeah, he goes, I had to change your scene. He goes, and I said, really? How, like, it was bad? He goes, "It was not good." I said, "Okay, fine, fine. Change my scene. That's okay." So we just have to, so I had to give up like control over that.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I love that. Well, okay, last 3 questions, I promise.
No, no, I love
When
it.
when people, when people face no, when you face no, how do you overcome it?
Yeah, one is I really work on my physiology because I really feel physically the nose. And
Yeah.
I noticed one time, even this was not too long ago, I got a no to a podcast, Steve, that was like the most, and I'm gonna say this without trying to sound snarky, inconsequential, like, this was not a career defining
Yeah.
client that I lost, and it was weird, and I felt physically that I was like, "Oh, that a no," and at the moment, I went, "Oh my gosh, that you really can still feel physically these rejections, it's so fascinating." So, for me, really work on I'm so good with thinking, like, I so value getting no, but I have to work on my physiology and just say, "Oh, that's my brain warning me of the danger of this," and that physical feeling will pass. And I work on just letting that go and seeing it and not letting that physical feeling spiral my thoughts of, "Oh my god, you're gonna die. You just got rejected for this podcast." You know? So but that's what the brain does, and
Yeah.
I've come to really get that over the years. So I work on that. My thought process is I just really value it, and I always reward myself mentally for good for you for going after it, good for you for following up, for
Oh.
asking over and over again. Like I really work on that patting myself on the shoulder for trying.
Yeah, for all of our listeners, the takeaway from that I heard that I think is probably one of the most genius pieces of advice I've actually heard is that positive self-talk, because that's what continues to motivate you to keep you moving forward, but most importantly, not taking rejection so personal. Doesn't mean you don't learn from it, doesn't mean it still doesn't sting, but at the same time, understanding what you can learn from it and then celebrating in your own way your own successes. It's not necessarily the acknowledgement from your spouse or even the customer that you might land or the deal that gets closed. It's about, hey, look, I showed up, I did what I thought should do. I made the outcome happen the way I expected it to, and it's you need to take that time and recognize yourself in doing that. So that's a beautiful, beautiful statement you just made. So thank you for that. I lied. There's one last question, and then I'm gonna ask you the
Okay.
final two. But what is if if you could hear someone that attended one of your events or a client that worked with you directly or someone that's read the book, what's the most what would be the one thing you would love to hear them say about you and your work?
Mm, probably that I just care so much to see people grow and change. That always makes me feel good, and yeah, that it's obvious how passionate I am and how much I care to help them.
I love that. That's great. Okay, so obviously I can't let you go without asking this question because it's an important one just for me and my own purposes. But when you hear the word the ripple effect, what does that conjure up for you? What does it mean to you?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Thanks.
The first thing that comes to mind is kinda like the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Like, I hear the ripple effect and I go like, "Oh, the ripple effect, everything's connected, so everything matters." So, how you treat someone today, that kindness, karma comes back, that person treats someone else nice, that person treats someone else nice. So what you and really because of that, it's kind of like what you do really matters, right? It actually gives meaning to small things instead of just it doesn't matter how I treat the mailman or how I go about this. So yeah, it's got a lot of meaning. I think it's got a lot of deep meaning to it if you really think about it. So that's what came up for me. Even when you reached out to me, I was like, oh, and I immediately saw, oh, the brand is the ripple effect. Like I could see like the brand throughout, and that's kind of what I thought. So when I dug deeper and it was like, oh, it's relationships, that made sense to me. It was like, okay, that connection piece.
I love it. Well, final question is what ripple can I create for you and Richard?
Just this podcast. This is like one of my I'm so excited about this and sharing this.
Oh, thank
All
you.
these questions and for whatever reason, like I felt like I did a good job today.
You
sometimes
did do it. You did an
sometimes
outstanding job.
well,
Yeah.
thank you. Sometimes I
Yeah.
get on, and I'm like not dialed in for whatever reason. I don't know. I didn't even have any chocolate before this, so I don't even have
Hey.
a lot of
Hey.
fuel.
Well, hey, that's good. I mean, I'm glad you feel good about it because I feel exceptionally good about it. You're a rock star, and you are so fun to talk to, and I've learned so much today. I know my audience has as well. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or on listening to it wherever your podcast ears might lead you to listen to on whatever platform. We definitely appreciate it. But Andrea, before I let you go, for the folks that definitely want to dive in more and maybe get involved in just figure out how to engage with your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can come to goforno.com. We've got a fun no quotient quiz. So if they want to test, see how their no quotient is, if it's high, moderate, low, come take the quiz, read the blog, hang out, and connect with me on social media. I'm at Go for No pretty much on everything. So working on doing some video. So I'm not on TikTok, but maybe someday.
Don't say
but
no. Yeah,
don't say
you
no to
might get
that.
there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, listen, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I greatly appreciate this. I can tell that we're going to be fast friends, and if there is anything I can do to support you guys moving forward, it'd be fun to even maybe find some opportunities to work together in 2025 because I think a lot of the work that you do and the work that I do really crosses over really well. There's a lot of compatibility. So we should talk about that at some point, set up a call and maybe brainstorm. But I just want to thank you for the bottom of my heart for the time and just the honesty and just your enthusiasm about what you do. It's infectious. And I'm so grateful to have you on the show. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Well, guys, we'll be back with another episode of The Ripple Effect very soon. But in the meantime, don't forget to go check out all of Andrea's links. And we're going to have some of those located in the show notes as well. But we appreciate you listening as always, being a supporter. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. 2025 is going to be the best year, I hope, for us and for you. And we just want to welcome you to a brand new year with a lot of new opportunities. And as Andrea would say, go for some more no's because you're going to eventually find your yeses. So ripple on.